YouTube and everything. But hi, Carol. How are you?
Good, good. I didn't mean to come in early because you had told me 8:30. Wait, where is Cindy?
I'm waving now. I I know everybody always shifts around as they come and go. I know it's hard to find everyone.
But I just was coming in early so that you could let me in when you were ready. So I didn't mean to.
Oh, it's okay. We're glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time to chat with us. We're really looking forward to it, and we have all sorts of great questions for you.
Oh, good. Hope I can
Um,
answer.
Good. Well, and everyone's read the book, so I was going to let you know that. So spoilers don't matter. You can talk about anything and it won't ruin anything for anybody. So that's always kind of nice. I'm sure you don't have to kind of watch what you're saying quite so much.
Yeah, that's nice. That's unusual. And this is actually my first time really talking about the book since, it comes out in about a month. Exactly. Yeah.
Good.
So thank you. Thank you all for reading.
Yeah, we're so excited. And we hear that a lot. It's actually kind of one of the unknown perks that I didn't expect when we started this is that we're usually the first group to get to talk with the author. So that's kind of fun.
Hmm.
Well, I'm going to let people ask their questions and then I'll just pop in when it's quiet. So anybody want to start?
Okay. Mm.
I
Karen?
can,
Okay, go ahead. Renata, perfect.
okay, I can start us off. I really enjoyed the book, so thank you for that. And I'm curious about ice caves and just
Oh,
your inspiration. I don't feel like I've seen one before.
uh-huh.
So just curious how
Yeah,
you developed
yeah.
and utilized them.
So I went to some ice caves. That's where I got the idea. And actually, the setting of the book is Hudson Valley. And oh, where are you all? You're in, I know, Central Time.
I'm in
I'm in
Houston.
Oklahoma.
It's like we're kind of all over.
Over. Oh, okay, great. That's great. So I'm in New York and I live in the Hudson Valley. And I've used the Hudson Valley for the location for a number of my books. In this particular setting where I've set the Briarwood, the college, it's on the, wait, let me just think for a second, the west side of the Hudson River, kind of near where I teach at SUNY New Paltz. So it's physically set there. And I'm getting to the ice caves. And the so where I teach is you've got the campus and then you have these mountains behind them. Now, there are no ice caves in those mountains near my campus. However, maybe about 30 miles south in a place called Sam's Point, there are ice caves. Oh, hold on a second. Let me just get rid of my AOL so we don't have to hear that sound. There we go. And so I went there a couple summers ago. Gosh, I don't even remember how long ago it was, but they're basically caused by faults in the earth. And as I just try to describe in the book, they're more like just like these fissures in the earth. And so you can go down into them, but you're not going underground so much. And so that's what most of the ice caves, and there are a lot of them there. And I went to a couple of them. I'm claustrophobic. I would never, I do. My characters always do lots of things that I would never in a million years do, like go into under the earth. Um, so these are, I describe the sort of shallow ones, and then I kind of let my imagination go and made up one, the Merlin's cave that they go into, which is much more extensive. I don't think there's anything like that in my area. But that's where I took a liberty. So I kind of moved those caves up to near where the campus that I teach is on. So I just thought they were so cool. So
Yeah, thank you.
yes, more than you'd probably. I can't do all the geology on it, but um, that's where the inspiration.
Right. Beatrice, do you have a question?
Is it like a cavern, like the house cavern?
I don't think it's the ones I was in. I've never been in House Cavern. It's not as far underground, the ones I've been in, but the
Okay.
ones I describe in the book is more like that. And I looked up stalactites and stalagmites, and I did, once I had the inspiration and wanted to use them, I did research and looked at, bunches of caves. But again, it's something I'm deeply afraid of. And I often try to write about things that really kind of creep me out, and the ice caves certainly. I think at one point when I started this book, probably might have been like 4 or 5 years ago, actually, where I first had the little inkling of it. I thought of the title as like the ice caves or something like that. It was always a central part of the inspiration for the book.
With your
Thank you.
claustrophobia, you don't like any kind of cave? So even like going to Carlsbad or some of those bigger caves, you just don't like to go underground?
I've never been to any of those caves.
Okay.
I have gone underground. I've been to in Rome to the catacombs. I didn't, very, very uneasy feeling. I'm not like severely claustrophobic, a little claustrophobic.
Oh,
And
I
the
was
idea
just kind
of
of
being
curious.
underground is particularly frightening to me. So when I'm afraid of something, I like to write about it. So, but I probably would not have gone under the way they do. Of course, Nell is afraid of it too. Um, but she has more peer pressure to go
She
than I.
definitely succumbs to that. I
Yeah,
think that that's probably helpful if you have fears to write about them, a good way to process them.
absolutely. I think actually most of my inspiration comes from things that keep me up at night and things that I'm afraid of or upset about. And so I try to spin a story. Usually in the story, it's worse than what I was imagining, and that is, it's just weirdly comforting to me.
I get that.
Yeah.
Somebody else I thought had a question at the same time. Okay, Jada, I thought it was you. Okay, good.
Yes, yeah. I just wanted to ask. I really enjoyed the aspect of the book of the 25 years since they'd been there and the flashbacks. And this is my 25th college year too. So it really struck me. So I just wonder which one did you enjoy writing the most, or how did you put those flashbacks together?
Well, and it's been a bit longer than 25 years since I was in college. So congratulations on your 25th reunion. Some of it came actually during the pandemic. I started doing a Zoom call with my college classmates. And so and it started out with just a couple of us. By the height of the pandemic, it was like 25 of us every Friday. And we actually were coming up to our 40th reunion, which was canceled due to the pandemic. So I was thinking a lot about those college days. I was really kind of immersed in it. And then, so I can't say that there was one that I liked writing about more, but I did feel very sort of very connected to my own college experience while I was writing it. And so the more I wrote it, the more I really kind of delved into that whole time period and I was talking weekly with people I went to college with, all of whom are much nicer people than I felt. And if you notice, I dedicated the book to old college friends forever young in my heart. It was inspiring, but my experience, my reunion on my Zoom calls was such a positive thing. Nobody killed anyone. There was no, I mean, there was some drama, actually. There was a little bit of drama, but so I kind of felt, I told people I was writing this book about a college reunion, but I said, but it's like really doesn't, ours, it's a lot better than, thank goodness.
You all didn't kill somebody and then 40 years later you're talking about it.
Well, if I had, I just wouldn't tell you that.
You wouldn't write this book probably, right?
Well, or maybe I would. I
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly. It'd be a
Yeah,
good confessing.
clearly not. We didn't do anything like that. But I always think there's something. There are probably things we did that we regret in our past, and so for me, that's the kind of stand-in of like, what would you do different if you could go back? And I actually spent a lot of time thinking, like, what if I could go back to myself in college? Like, what if I could like just zoom into that 18-year-old body, and what would it be like? And I spent so much time thinking about it that I think it did put me in touch with my younger self.
Well, the funny thing is, several people said that they were dreaming about college and college friends after they read your book.
Oh, really? Cool. I hope they were all good dreams. That was fun.
What
Yeah.
about
No one died in the dream, so that was good too.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. Glad to inspire
I
that.
did have a question in terms of planning out. Do you plan out your plot, or
Wait,
do you kind of
who's talking and wave to me for a
oh,
second?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
you're
don't
not,
have
oh,
my
okay.
camera on.
Oh, Karen, sure.
it's
Okay.
Karen
Hi.
McNamara?
Okay. Hi, Karen. So,
Hi.
and sorry, you said, tell me.
Do you plot out your stories from the beginning, or are you more the pantser or the plotter?
I am more of a pantser, although and everyone knows the pantser versus plotter. I do some planning, plotting, but I find that I can't really go that far just in my head. I need to be writing to figure it out. So I have some things figured out. I know some things. Very often I have an idea of how I want the book to end. But I don't, there's like a whole bunch in the middle, which I really don't know how I'm going to get there. So I do figure it out as I go along, which means that I then have to do a lot of rewriting. Because sometimes I really don't understand the book entirely until I get to the end of the first draft. And then I have to go back and go like, oh, okay, this is really what I wanted to say. And, you know, I need to change a lot of things in order to have it all match up to where I got to. So
Got it. Thank you.
you're welcome.
So I was curious about, okay, Karen, go ahead, and then I'll ask mine after.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry, I do a Zoom class, so I'm used to a lot of the.
Well, you can go. Yeah, it didn't matter to me, but Karen, go right ahead.
Okay.
I had a question about that. Bruce waits a really long time to get revenge, and also then she, orchestrates it all around this reunion time. If they hadn't had the reunion, what, like, do you think she would have just murdered the main character, or like, how do you envision that if the reunion hadn't gone to pass?
Well, it's really the body being found, right? So it's the bones are found, and then she knows that they're going to find out that Lane is dead, that's Lane in the cave and not not her. So
Okay.
that is what really propels her. And then she and then that happens right as the reunion is happening. So it's fortuitous. I mean, I think that's at the point where she has to think quickly and decide what she's going to do. And, she knows that reunion is coming up as well. So I think that's, would she have, I see her as planning it, rather quickly and making those decisions. And some of it, she knew that was coming, that was going to happen before. But I think it's really when that body is found, she knows she has to act, and it spurs all that anger and resentment of, and seeing them all together too. I think would, after, the way she felt mistreated by the whole group. So I hope that answers that.
Yeah, thank you. I was just curious because I was like, oh, she's worked with this lady for 5 years.
I know. And it's like, it's hard to believe in some ways that, someone, you could be with somebody every day and not know that they felt differently about you. But I've had some rude shocks like that. So I just think she's somebody who really has a mask. And I did try to give some clues to the fact that she's reticent in a way that Nell reads one way. Nell thinks, oh, she's closed off about some things, but she thinks it maybe is because she was an abuse victim. She reads into Ruth's affect in her own way. And so she doesn't read the signs that this is somebody who is, actually not very friendly towards her at all.
Thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So I was curious about the inspiration for the college and for the Raven Society. Did you pull those from somewhere? Are they amalgamations of different things? How did that work for you?
So the place is, as I've said, it's physically set where the campus that I teach at, but it's not the campus where I teach. I teach at the State University of New York at New Paltz. It's a state school. It's really not, it's not like the, beautiful little private school that Briarwood is. Briarwood is really inspired by where I went to college on the other side of the river, Vassar College, which was, a small select private school and very, very pretty and, but not sort of physically there in the mountains. So the Raven Society, I do make that up. That is something I just sort of came up with. And I was actually spent one day like looking up private, like honor societies and different colleges and names of honor societies when I was trying to come up with the Raven Society. And of course, the Poe reference, I just, that all sort of, I just made up. The one bit from my own college experience that is similar to it really was at Vassar, they have something called the daisy chain. And it's at graduation, there's a chosen group of sophomores who carry this beautiful, like, train of daisies. It's like daisies woven together, and it's part of the graduation ritual. And when you're a sophomore, you can apply to be in the daisy chain. And when you go to like an interview, and I did this my sophomore year, you go to an interview, and I realized after, like, years later, I realized, wow, I had no idea what was actually involved in this. So I found out later that, people who like wanted to be on the daisy chain, they had like all their GPA and their club affiliations. I was like, oh, I think it would be fun to carry a daisy chain. I was like clueless. But they announced the winners. You find out on some day towards the end of the year. We had our little mailboxes, and you would open it and there'd be a daisy in it. And of course, there was no daisy in mine. And I still kind of remember that, that like people are picking out the daisies. It wasn't quite as dramatic as the black feather, but that feeling of not belonging or not being chosen, even though, it wasn't that big a thing to me, but other things were, and that kind of stuck with me, what it would feel like. And to have it be public like that, to have like everyone see like, oh, you've been chosen for this thing. And then like the fact that it's a writing group, I actually did not take writing classes in college, although I was writing before college. I started writing again after college. I did not take a single creative writing class in college. Wow. I did something else. I was a Latin major. So and later I did an MFA. I've been in lots of writing workshops, but that idea of being like the small group of chosen writers in a school, that, really I sort of projected from other experiences. And I thought, I bet that would have been from people I've spoken to who were in those kind of groups in college. I bet it would have been even more intense to have that kind of group in college, a group to be chosen for your writing ability, and then to be in this sort of select group, and all the envy that might arouse.
And speaking of the writing group and the way the book wraps up, that was interesting that the stories had been switched and that it was Nell's story instead of Lane's that the professor had really liked. I thought that was a good twist.
Thanks. Yeah. And that would be so frustrating to have someone and after, and he has lost his faculties by then. So it's, it would be a very sad situation to be in, I think, to have a professor like that, who is making those kind of mistakes. But yep, that would be awful.
Yes, it would be, because you'd be so excited that your story had been chosen, and then you realize, oh my gosh, it's not my story. And
Yeah.
it's my best friend's story, but there's all this drama between them already.
Yeah. So obviously I was very plugged into the whole idea of envy and jealousy and toxic female friendships. And I was thinking a lot about that and just how
Especially
bad.
at that age and that environment, college, you're all thrown together and you're still young, and there's just kind of a lot. It's hard sometimes to work through all of that at that age.
I think so. I think it can be really difficult. And since I teach as well, I was thinking about my own experiences, but, I stand in front of a, group of college students twice a week all through the year. So I see what, and you realize just you know, how volatile everything is at that age where, one day you can think like you're on, you can see it in their faces. One day they're, feel really confident and things are going great, but then another day they can just be kind of, they can be crushed so easily. Which I try to have never. I'm like the opposite writing teacher than um, than in this book. I try to everything's very gentle, but even when you do that, they pin a lot of hopes on success, and you can see how easy it would be for them to be. They take everything very hard.
For sure.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything they want to ask? I can keep asking questions, but I just want to make sure if you have a question, you get to ask it.
Cindy, this is Nicole. I don't
Hey,
have my
Nicole.
video on.
That's okay.
I guess along those lines, your characters, you talked about you've got students, but also your own college experience. How do you come up with your characters' stories? Is it students that you have or your own past experiences?
Well, probably more my own past experiences, with a little, and no character is solely, based on a person. I just don't. Well, I should say that I have occasionally plucked a person live from my life and put them as in a book, but usually that it's not more of a minor character or sort of a sort of walk-in character. But I usually do not do that. So there are just pieces of, like Lane, for instance, there were pieces of, people I knew, but really once she was on the page, once I was creating her, there were a lot of, girls I admired in college, or girls I see, when I see my students, there's the one that, just sort of stands out and is so kind of glamorous. And I remember thinking that about, certain women that, I knew in college. But then once she's on the page, I just start thinking of her as a character, and she's just her own person. And I start thinking about, well, why is she like this? And so, like, when I started out with Lane, I didn't necessarily know, she had this particular relationship with her mother. I didn't know that her mother was going to die on that causeway. It wasn't until really I got to, where I was writing about the summer, what happened the summer before their senior, I think it's the summer before their senior year, or is it before their junior year? I think it's before their junior year. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting. But it was, I was thinking about, like, well, what happened to Lane's mother? And, so then as I wrote it, that evolved, that's her backstory, that she had this kind of relationship, so that you start to understand, why Lane is the way she is. Which doesn't necessarily mean that you forgive her all her, the cruel things she does, but you understand her a little bit more. So it's always like, there's a germ of like a real person here and there. And then, just really thinking about them as a human character on the page, and why they are doing and saying the things that they are doing and saying. I hope that it's a strange little process there, because, as you're writing, they suddenly, people talk about, like, oh, the characters just got up and did what they, and did their own thing. And that obviously doesn't really happen. But I do think when you're writing, you're almost like tapped into like a deeper level of consciousness, so that, thoughts that unconscious thoughts you have about people and situations sort of come to the forefront. Not to say.
Oh, no, thank you. It felt realistic because, I mean, I've got a daughter in college. I went to college way back when, but you've got relationships, girl relationships, girls with boys, and all the competition, which doesn't change. So I was just curious.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, all that competition. And I can certainly remember every writer is very tuned into envy. because so that's something very alive to me, that's what it feels like to envy somebody.
Nicole, that was a great question. And in line with that question, what about picking the names of your characters? I think that name association is so strong for people. How do you go about choosing the names of your characters? And in Nell's situation where she had one name and they kind of nicknamed her something else and all of that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, the whole Lane and Nell, Ellen, that connection, part of it came from just the idea that, the Lady of Shalott and that beautiful pre-Raphaelite picture of the Lady of Shalott and that whole legend. And I actually remember, I don't think I had a picture of it on my college wall. I actually remember going into a room at Vassar, but not when I was in college. I think it was during a reunion where somebody had all the pre-Raphaelite prints on the wall, and it was really beautiful. And actually, the young woman, must have been like maybe my 20th reunion, and this was somebody, who was 20 years younger. She was a lovely young woman and seemed very sophisticated. And that little bit stayed in my head. So I started working with Elaine, the name Elaine, Lane. I just thought it's hard. Actually, picking the name can be endless amounts of me walking around doing whatever I'm doing, going Lane, like saying names out loud until one, because you want a name that doesn't sound too fussy, but sounds unique, so that people will remember it. You want it to sound a little different from the other names. Like you don't want all names that sound alike. So they're all different things. So I don't know. I probably worked for quite a while on getting that pairing of Nell and Lane, so that they're like the same name, but they've been each has been turned a little bit. So I thought that gave kind of a nice, like they were kind of parallel people. But there was like a little, and of course that Lane herself sort of names Nell,
Right.
and it has that power over her. Also, this is my 25th book. So I have to at some point go, what names have not I used?
Do you keep a running list? I was just talking to an author the other day for an interview, and she said, I really need to start keeping a running list because I feel like I'm
Oh my
naming all of
God.
my ancillary characters the same name, because you're going to gravitate to like Matthew over and over again or whatever it is. And so do you kind of keep a running list, or do you just have a good enough memory that you know the names you've used?
It's been such a smart idea. If only I could go back in time and start or like figure out how to catalog. No, I don't. And I will embarrassingly forget names in books, that were not that long ago. And sometimes I'll be starting a book and I'll be writing for a while, and I'm not worried about this minor characters. I'm sure I've use those over and over, but I'm trying not to reuse like the main characters. So I'll be writing for a while and I'll go like, wait. Usually not like the narrator, but I'll go like just like last week I was like, have I used the name Callum for the love interest before? I think I have. So that's another sort of added challenge, like to find a name. I spend a ridiculous amount of time looking up names on behindthename.com. I want the name to, I'll think about what the name means and, do all that stuff. But you have to remember that, you can have this great idea of like, ooh, symbolically, this name should be, and then you're like, yeah, but this character, when their mother named them, they didn't know they were going to be in this novel. And so it's ridiculous in a way to have their names be, symbolically correct for the, and then you also have to think about like, well, what generation is this? What names, like there aren't a lot of 20-year-old Carols or Barbs or, so, so you have to think of, you think about like, okay, so that's another thing that my students are very helpful for. So, and you can look up, what were the, so this is, they're teenagers in the 90s. When were they born? What were the most common names? So lots of Lots of stuff goes into that. It's fun, but it can also be a little maddening, quite frankly, because it can turn your brain into sort of word salad, walking around thinking of names.
I can see that because I think there are, as you just mentioned, all of those things, but also just, certain names are associated with certain things, I think, as well. And so, it's just interesting as you're thinking through names to figure out how you land on them.
Yeah. It's a lot of hit or miss. I change them as I go along as well. I'll be, a character will be one name for a while, and then I'll just, that's still not right. And, until you get it, and it's annoying because until you get it right, it's very hard to, it's part of building who they are.
Good. Thank you, Megan, for raising your hand. That helps me know because I don't want to just keep saying, does anybody have questions? But that's great. So thank you, Megan.
You're welcome. Sorry, I'm into the tech. Hi, Carol. Thank you for
Hi.
joining us.
Yeah.
Speaking of 25 books, I was just curious if you could talk to us a little bit about your journey over those 25 books, because it sounds like you've written in some different genres. A lot of them have been in this genre, but some other ones. And then it sounds like you also have a pen name too. Is that true?
Two. I have two. Yeah.
Two. So two and your name and all the genres.
Yes.
So can you just talk a little bit about that process, why you made the switch, and just a little bit on that?
Sure. So let's see, my first book was published 2002, I think. It's called The Lake of Dead Languages. And that was really a mystery, or thriller kind of book. And I wrote after that 6 more books in that genre that were, I wasn't really even sure what genre I was writing in. I once asked my editor and she said, literary thriller. So a lot of these names have sort of changed. It wasn't even like, didn't have mystery written on it. But anyways, somebody died and, it was a mystery. So I wrote 7 mysteries very happily and delighted to be able to write. And then after the 7th, or while I was writing the 7th, I realized, wow, I think I need to do something different, because I was beginning to feel like I might be repeating myself, or, as I started to think of the next book, I was like, oh no, you've done that before. And so I knew I kind of needed a break, but I didn't need a break from writing because I'm someone who just needs to be writing. So I had an idea for a fantasy book. So I wrote a book called The Demon Lover, and I proposed it to my publisher, and they accepted it, but they thought, let's keep that different from Carol Goodman, because your Carol Goodman readers, however many there are, might, this will be different for them. So they suggested I use a pseudonym, and I did, and we came up with it that day actually, and it's Juliet Dark, which is ooh. I always think there's this a line in a book by Anita Bruckner about a character who's a romance writer, and it says that she wrote her romance books under a more thrusting name. I know, I've always loved that. So Juliet Dark was kind of my thrusting name. So I wrote 3 books as Juliet Dark, and they were fun. I had a great time. I just enjoyed, I did it because I just really needed to do something different. It was like paranormal fantasy, also set on a college campus though. And I did that. And then I was having so much fun that my husband and I decided to write 3 urban fantasy books together. And so we combined our names. Lee is his name. And so the author, those books are written under Lee Carroll. And that was a 3-book urban fantasy trilogy. And then I still had not gotten this out of my system. I wrote 3 fantasy YA books under Carol Goodman. So that was my little foray into the fantasy world. And then I was ready to come back to writing mystery. And the mystery field had changed while I had been in Fairy and Gone. And because Gone Girl had been written. And that was, suddenly things were more about domestic suspense. So when I came back, I actually felt very kind of refreshed. I felt like I had a new slant on writing. And so now it's been, I think this might be my 8th and 7th. I have to count about my 7th. No, I don't even have a book by me. I'm not sure, but I'm getting to that point again where I might I might have to do something a little different. So
I
that's yeah.
I have your book in front of me. Carol, tell me the last one, like when you stopped writing, and then I can count for you. It was the Night Villa, the last one before you took a break from mysteries.
No, Arcadia Falls is the last one.
Okay, so then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then this is 8.
Okay, yes. So this is 8. So I've gotten a little bit further without having to do something. And actually, so this is 8, and then I've written the book that will come out next year as well. So that would be 9. I think I've learned a little bit more like how to sort of keep doing something different within the same genre. But I am actually interested. I've written a historical mystery, which I haven't placed yet because it is different again from what from these books. So, but I kind of feel like I can do both, or at least I'll try to at the same time. So that's kind of the publishing journey of, and you know how I ended up doing something different, which frankly is not always the best thing to do in terms of a career. People kind of like you to stay in, you know, one genre. But I think creatively, you know, often writers, you know, they have to do something different, you know, just so they, you know, you don't feel, because I never want to feel like I'm, you know, doing something predictable, because then the reader will
And
feel like it's predictable.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just curious if your husband had written before, or was that the first time he wrote when you
You know,
partnered together?
he had written before. He's actually a
Okay.
very accomplished poet. And he had written, he had not published a novel before, but he's published another novel independently since. But he had written, I think, 1 or 2 that had not been published. So he was an experienced writer. And
Very cool.
yeah. So and a great, and actually he is for my many of my earlier books, he often has written poetry for those books. If I have a character who's a poet in those earlier books, the poems will be are actually by him, which I always put in the acknowledgments that he wrote the poems. So
That's great.
yeah, it was fun.
That's really cool. You know, I was curious when you were talking about writing and before writing in a different genre and having the pseudonym. It seems like that in the last it's probably been longer than that, but I've noticed it in the last 2 to 3 years. But there is more genre crossing now that, you know, I know several authors that write thrillers. They're also writing romance, or they're writing romance and they're writing thrillers. Do you think, like, if you go to sell your historical mystery, you'll just keep it under Carol Goodman, because people are really branching out a lot more today than they did 20 years ago or 15 years ago, whenever you were making the switch?
Right. I would want to, actually, very much. I mean, the pseudonym was kind of fun, you know, and at the time, and it made sense also for what my husband and I wrote together.
Right.
But I would prefer to continue writing under my name for the historical mystery. And although I did notice, I was looking at one historic imprint, and I was looking at a bunch of historical mysteries, and I noticed what some writers had done was they would be, you know, their full name for one genre, but then for another, it would be the initials. So I could write under C.S. Goodman for historical mystery. I would rather, because I just think it's like, it's so hard to sort of get and to make any kind of inroad in publishing now. It's such a very competitive marketplace that if I, you know, whatever readership I have, whatever name recognition I have, I would prefer to keep that than to try to start all over again.
Well, and I have to think that the internet has really changed all of that, because they want authors to have websites. So you're not going to create a whole other website. I mean, you know, you're going to be the same person. You're going to want it all in one logical place, but also readers can look it up. It's so much easier now to know what a book's about. You look on Goodreads, you look on wherever. So, you know, if you're writing, even if you were writing dark supernatural fantasy, people can look up what the book's about before they decide whether they're going to read it, which I think wasn't the case necessarily nearly as easy 20 years ago or 15 years ago.
Would accidentally, like, you know, fall upon a book that, oh, it's by this author, it's going to be like her other books.
Exactly. So Karen, I'm sorry, I know you have your hand up. I just wanted to kind of follow up while we were talking about that.
No, thank you. That was a good question.
Yeah, no problem. I was curious, like, could you talk about the inclusion of the Agatha nods to Agatha Christie and then you were none, and then there were none, with the little poem and,
Oh yeah, yeah,
stuff
yeah.
like that. Like, could you talk about that? That was fun.
It was fun, right? And that was not in the first draft. I was and of course, I think I had just done a panel on locked room mysteries, which, this is, secluded. Anytime you have a secluded place where people are dying. I mean, this isn't like an island exactly like Agatha Christie's and Then There Were None. But of course, anytime you have an enclosed place where a certain number of people are and then they're dying, you're going to think of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, which I've reread many, many times to try to figure out how does that work, that it's such a masterful book. So I thought it would be the kind of, especially this is a group of very bookish and kind of pretentious college students who would have all the references, and so it would be fun, they would do something like that. And specifically, I think Ruth would have a great fun doing something like that, to come up with this little poem. And it was fun to write. And when I did, I think it sort of appeared in like the second or third draft that I was working with my editor. And I remember my editor was very happy about it. She was like, "Oh, this was fun." But she did correct one line. She was like, "This line doesn't quite make sense." We sort of had to engineer it a little bit. It was hard to like figure out exactly how it would work and to do the rhyme and all of that. And I'm not even sure if the rhythm works, because I'm not really that good at figuring out the rhythm of things. But I hopefully it basically works. But
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, yeah. So
Renata.
I just had a question about your writing process, since you're teaching as well. Do you write like in one burst when you're out of school? Are you writing as you're teaching? How does that work?
So I'm pretty like regular actually about my writing. I pretty much write almost every day, except generally not the days when I'm teaching, and I generally teach 2 days a week during the semester. So during the school year, every day that I am not teaching, I will get up and do my morning routine, and then I will write for a couple of hours, depending on whether I'm at the beginning of a book or towards middle end. As I go further on, I'll write for longer hours. The beginnings of books are really tough. You're inventing everything. So if you could write for like 2 hours, it's like that's enough. And then I do really look forward to the summer, because I'll manage to keep writing all semester, but it can get a little difficult. And I'll often be like, just like, okay, I'm gonna keep this book going until the summer, and then I'm going to have a nice burst. Or as it's worked out the last couple of summers, so I've turned in a book right at the end of the semester. And then I've had the summer to do the rewriting. So that's, and that kind of works out nicely too, because when you're rewriting, it's an opportunity to see the book as a whole. Whereas over the months and months you've been writing it, you tend to see it in pieces. It's sort of hard to remember the whole book as you're writing it. And then, so it's good I like when I start doing the rewrites to have like, an intensive 10 days where I can, or 2 weeks where just like, I'm just going to be focused. I'm going to be reading the book and, reading it over and over during that period. So it's nice to like not have to go off and teach. So
Yeah. Thank you. Are you on summer now?
Oh, I am on summer now. And I just got my editorial letter for the book I turned in June 1st. So I will be starting that revision process. But before it came, I finished the book and I had like 2 blessed weeks of sort of sitting out on my deck and reading and writing. I started doing a little bit of writing, but I was like, but way more relaxed than I had been for the, all the semester.
Do your books normally come out the same time every year? Are they usually summer books?
It's I think been for, I don't know how many, it's been for a while now that they've been coming out in July.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's been since I started at William Morrow, which the first book with William Morrow was The Widow's House. But and this is like my 7th, I think, with William Morrow, something like that. So I think certainly the last 4 or 5 years, they've been summer, and they feel like, I talked to my editor about this recently, and she said, yeah, right now we think that's a good place for you. At some point they might shift, there's always a possibility of being shifted around. And when I first started, I think my first 7 books always came out in February or January.
Yeah.
It was I tend to think my books are wintry. So in a way, summer is a kind of funny time for them, but on the other hand, people have time to read. so
It's always interesting, and I don't know the first thing about how they decide all of that. And it sounds like your editors have a plan, but it is always interesting how they feel like certain books come out at certain times, and there's reasoning behind all of that. And I wouldn't even pretend to guess all of that, but it's interesting.
I don't even understand it myself, really. There's all this, like, I do know that like fall is like the sort of big season, like, and that's in a way, so unless you are one of the top, unless you're Stephen King or, one of the top writers, you don't really want to come out in the fall because you're then competing with those writers. Now, that's sort of one rule, but obviously a lot of people, there are a lot of books and they have to all come out sometime. So, how they exactly figure it out, I'm not sure. I've been happy with the summer publication because first of all, it means that I can do events and travel for the book, and it's summer, not like, for a couple of years, I remember trying to do events in January or February and just getting like snowed out and not being able to go to the event, and it's good for me that the publication comes not when I'm teaching,
Well,
so
that's true too. Yeah, you don't have to miss a bunch of classes or figure all that out and mess with your schedule and everything. That's true. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, no, it's easier, but I can guarantee you that's not why that's my date. The publishers never said to me, when would you like your book to come
What works best for you? Well, and I know, particularly the last couple of years have been so crazy because so many things have gotten moved around with COVID and the shortages, and that it just seems like everything is wonky. I mean, I think it's settling down again, but I mean, it just seems like that things were just all over the place for a while as well. But that's interesting. And I guess if July is your time, then your readers know, okay, every July we're looking for a new Carol Goodman book.
Yeah, and that's certainly how I, as a reader, will look. I'll be like, oh, when was their last book? When can I expect another book? Yeah. And I want that book to come out if it's of a writer that so I hate when there are some writers who I really like, but I haven't seen a new book in years, and I'm always like going and looking, and they're like, where are they? Why haven't they?
What has happened, right?
Why hasn't Gillian Flynn written a new book? Or
no.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. She hasn't in a while.
Not since Gone Girl.
Yeah. Well, probably hard to top Gone Girl.
My heart bleeds.
Yes, you're so sympathetic, right? Well, does anybody else have any questions? Thank you, Carol. I mean, I don't want to, if you have any more questions, I don't want to leave anybody out. Nope. Yeah. Good. Well, this was delightful. Thank you for taking the time to talk with us. We really appreciate it.
Sure. It was so nice. And thank you so much for reading the book. That really means a lot to me. And tell your friends. And leave reviews on Goodreads and Amazon. I'm trying to remember what my publicist would tell me to say.
Exactly. And Instagram. Everybody's really good about posting on Instagram too. And that's a great way to get the word out as well.
back, and that's great. Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. It's a wonderful group. Thank you.
Oh, good. Well, thank you and have a great night and good luck with everything.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
Everyone enjoy their summer.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.